Before the world took shape, God fought a dragon in the sea and did not kill it. That dragon was Leviathan. This monster is older than the Bible and older than the world itself. It rises from primordial chaos and returns at the end of days for a battle that will shake the world. Sometimes it has one head, sometimes 7. It breathes fire and its movements make the sea boil. In this episode of the Maritime mythos, we trace Leviathan's full journey from a forgotten sea dragon to the Bible's beast of the apocalypse. The story of our dragon begins in the city of Ugaritic many thousands of years ago, long before anyone had ever heard the name Leviathan. Basking on the Mediterranean coast of what is now Syria, Ugaritic sat on a site with settlement layers reaching back to around 7000 BC, painting the origin story of our dragon as truly ancient. The city had close ties to the Hittite Empire, at times serving as its vassal. It sent tribute to Egypt and maintained trade and diplomatic relations with Cyprus, then known as Alashiya. The texts that matter to us were written in the Ugaritic language. Its scribes wrote in cuneiform on clay tablets, preserving myths of their gods. El, the distant high god, Baal, the stormbringer, Yam, the sea god, and a terrifying serpent named Lotan. On those tablets, Lotan is described in phrases that should sound familiar. He is called the fleeing serpent. He is called the twisting serpent. And in one line, he is named the mighty one with 7 heads. 7 heads rising from a single massive body coiled in the depths, champion of the sea god Yam. If those titles ring a bell, they should. Centuries later, the prophet Isaiah would describe Leviathan using those same epithets, lifting them from the Ugaritic myths and giving them to a new monster. Linguistically and mythologically, Lotan is Leviathan's direct ancestor. The name itself comes from the same root, a Semitic word meaning to coil or to twist. Ugaritic Lotan, Hebrew Leviathan, different dialects, but the same underlying serpent. And Lotan was not just a monster of an ancient city, he was part of a pattern. Scholars call it the Chaoskampf, the battle against chaos, from Greek chaos and German Kampf, meaning struggle or fight. The term was coined by the German biblical scholar Hermann Gunkel in the late 19th century. He was among the first to systematically identify this combat with chaos pattern in the Hebrew Bible, particularly in Genesis and the Psalms, alongside older Near Eastern dragon myths. Across the ancient Near East and far beyond, cultures told a similar story. A young storm or warrior god faces an ancient creature of the deep, usually a serpent associated with the sea, and defeats it to establish order. When we speak of a young storm god, we mean figures such as Thor. The myth of Hadad defeating Lotan, Yahweh defeating Leviathan, and Marduk defeating Tiamat in the mythologies of the ancient Near East are classical examples of this Chaoskampf pattern, also reflected in Zeus's slaying of Typhon in Greek mythology and Thor's struggle against Jörmungandr. The Litani River, which winds through the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, takes its name from Lotan. The river itself was once believed to be the personification of the god. In Canaan, in the world preserved by the scribes of Ugaritic, this struggle took shape through 3 figures, Baal, Yam, and Lotan. In ancient times, when gods were said to walk the earth and command the forces of nature, Yam, the sea god, grew restless. Watching the other gods and their domains, his anger hardened into ambition. He wanted to be not just a god among gods, but king of the gods. That claim set the first fires of war among the divine. Baal, lord of thunder and rain, did not bend before Yam's demand. He refused to submit and met the sea god's challenge with fierce resistance, thunder against tide. Between them stood El, the high god, ancient, distant, and slow to choose sides. El lingered in hesitation, weighing Yam's demand and delaying his decision until it became clear how the conflict would unfold. Baal did not rush blindly into the coming battle. He knew that thunder alone would not be enough to break the sea. Before facing Yam, he went to Kothar wa Hasis, the divine craftsman, the god who understood how power had to be shaped before it could be used. In Kothar's forge, Baal's cause was given form. From metal and magic, the craftsman fashioned 2 enchanted clubs, later translated as chaser and driver. They were made not merely to strike, but to pursue, to force the sea back, and to drive chaos away from its claim. Armed with these weapons, Baal returned to face Yam, but the sea god did not stand alone. From the depths rose his champion, Lotan, the coiled serpent, vast and ancient, bound to Yam as the living strength of the deep. The texts speak of him as a single massive body crowned with 7 heads, a creature whose coils belonged as much to the sea itself as to flesh. When Lotan emerged, it was as if the depths had taken shape and chosen a form. In the Ugaritic myth, Baal triumphs over Yam and Lotan, and this victory marks the moment he establishes his authority among the gods. The story then moves on to later episodes, Baal's palace and his conflict with Mot, but the struggle with Yam and Lotan ends with their defeat. As in other Chaoskampf stories, the sea god is defeated, the serpent is slain, and Baal claims kingship. Order triumphs over chaos, at least for now. The age of this image can be seen in the archaeological record. A stone cylinder seal from Tel Asmar in Iraq, dated to around 2200 BCE, long before the Bible, shows 2 figures spearing a 7-headed monster. 7 snakeheads rise from a single body, some already drooping as if slain. Some scholars, most notably Lambert, have argued that later biblical descriptions of the sea serpent preserved the Ugaritic language itself, with passages such as Isaiah 27:1 echoing the older text almost word for word. So when later texts describe a multi-headed sea dragon crushed by a storm-like deity, they are drawing on something that was carved into stone more than 4,000 years ago. By the time ancient Israel emerges and begins to form its own scriptures, this image, the World Serpent, multi-headed, slain by a god of storm or order, has been circulating in the cultural imagination for centuries. Israel takes that monster, renames it, and places it beneath a very different god. Open the Hebrew Bible and you will find Leviathan across several key passages, Psalms, Isaiah, and Job, each showing a different side of the creature. It never gets a full origin story there, but if you piece together the verses, you get something close to a medieval bestiary entry or a monster manual of a sort. Let's take a look at some of these examples. Each text shows a different face of the same creature. Later in this episode, we will see how John confronts the dragon in the book of Revelation when Leviathan's story crosses into the New Testament and takes on its final form. The multi-headed chaos monster. Psalms. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. Notice the wording, sea monsters, plural. And then the heads of Leviathan, also plural. This is not a one-headed known animal of the time. This is the old 7-headed serpent, Lotan, now wearing the name Leviathan. Already here, we see two motifs that will keep coming back: multiple heads and Leviathan as food. Leviathan and witchcraft, Job 3. Job says, "Let those who are experts at cursing, whose cursing could rouse Leviathan, curse that day." That line is easy to miss, but it's loaded. The text assumes there are people who practice witchcraft and who are said to be capable of rousing Leviathan. This is not metaphor. Leviathan is treated as something that can be awakened, something dangerous enough that you do not want it stirred at all. Here, Leviathan is no longer just a poetic image. It is a force that can be called up through curses, something real enough to fear and powerful enough that its name belongs in spells meant to ruin a day or a life. Then comes Job 41, which turns into a sort of monster manual. In discourse with Job, God points to two creatures of his creation, Behemoth, the land beast, and Leviathan, the sea beast. Leviathan's description runs for more than 30 verses. It reads more like a medieval bestiary entry than a Bible passage. It says, "Iron is straw to him, bronze is rotten wood, arrows bounce off, and clubs shatter. His back is a mass of interlocking bronze-like shields, sealed so tightly that no air can pass between them. His underside is sharp and jagged. When he moves, the seabed looks plowed by blades." Then the text makes it clear that this is not a normal animal. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth, his breath kindles coals, and flame comes forth from his mouth. Leviathan breathes fire. Smoke pours from his nostrils. His eyes glow like the dawn. When he rises, warriors panic. The sea itself churns and shines behind him, as if boiling. No one on earth is his equal, God says. Leviathan is king over all the sons of pride. This is clearly not a crocodile as some modern interpretations would like us to think. The text is very clear. It wants you to picture a fire-breathing dragon. Leviathan is presented as the ultimate example of something humans cannot control, but God can. The playful pet, Psalm 104. Further in the Psalms, the tone shifts. Psalm 104 moves through the whole created world and arrives at the sea. There go the ships and Leviathan, which you formed to play in it. The verb matters. It means to sport, to frolic, even to amuse oneself. The same Leviathan that terrifies Job, that shrugs off weapons and breathes fire, is here described as something God made to play in the ocean. From a human point of view, Leviathan is unstoppable. From God's point of view, it is a toy. The final slaying, Isaiah 27. The last major biblical appearance of Leviathan comes in an eschatological setting, language about the end of the world and how it will finally be set right. Isaiah 27 says, "In that day the Lord will punish Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea." Here are those Ugaritic epithets showing up again. Fleeing serpent, twisting serpent, transplanted into the Hebrew text. So the biblical Leviathan is not one thing. It is many things at once: a multi-headed chaos monster, a fire-breathing dragon, a creature invoked in witchcraft, a divine plaything, and a beast marked for destruction at the end of time. Powerful, dangerous, real, and always, ultimately under God's control. And that sets the stage for how later writers expand the myth. The seven-headed dragon, Revelation. In the New Testament, The book of Revelation finally gives a name to the sea dragon that has been circling the edges of the Bible for centuries. John describes a great red dragon appearing in heaven, a creature with 7 heads and 10 horns, crowned and blasphemous, poised to devour a child at birth. Later, a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns rises directly from the sea itself. For the first time, the Chaos Dragon is identified explicitly. This is the ancient serpent called the Devil and Satan. What Revelation does here is not invention, but fusion. The imagery is drawn straight from the Hebrew Bible's sea monster tradition: the many-headed Leviathan of Psalm 74, the twisting serpent of Isaiah 27. But now the dragon is no longer just chaos. It is welded to cosmic evil, imperial power, and opposition to God at the end of history. John names what earlier texts only hinted at. When medieval readers encountered a 7-headed dragon from the sea, crowned and defiant, they could hardly avoid thinking of Leviathan. Even when Revelation speaks of a dragon or a beast, the shape and setting come from the older myth: a many-headed sea monster, opposing God, finally judged and destroyed at the end of days. Leviathan does not remain confined to the Bible and Scripture. In the Middle Ages, it drifts back into the sea and into the pages of Bestiaries. Medieval bestiaries were illustrated books that described animals both real and monstrous, and they treated Leviathan not as a symbol, but as a creature with a body, habits, and a place in the ocean. Copied and recopied in medieval Latin from roughly the 12th to the 13th centuries, these texts mixed scripture, classical myth, and sailor lore into something that reads less like theology and more like a field guide to a dangerous world. One early medieval illustration from the Liber Floridus, compiled around 1120 CE, shows the Antichrist seated upon Leviathan itself, the monster drawn as a vast sea dragon swallowing souls. In these images, Leviathan is not hidden in prophecy. It is present, looming, and visible. This image belongs to a wider medieval habit of placing Satan, the Antichrist, or Babylon literally atop Leviathan, turning the sea dragon into a living throne or vehicle for evil at the end of time. In the Liber Floridus, attributed to Lambert of Saint-Omer, the Antichrist is shown seated on a many-headed sea monster explicitly identified with Leviathan, collapsing Revelation's dragon and beasts into a single composite enemy of God. Medieval illuminators often fused Revelation's imagery, the dragon, the beast from the sea, and the beast from the earth, into one grotesque hybrid. By having Satan or the Antichrist sit upon Leviathan, the sea monster becomes the physical base of his power. Leviathan is no longer just a frightening animal, but the infrastructure of evil itself, the chaos sea harnessed and weaponized, waiting to be destroyed along with its rider at the Last Judgment. Seen this way, these illuminations function as late remixes of far older Chaos Dragon motifs. What began as Lotan, the serpent of Yam in Ugaritic myth, and later appeared as God's restrained enemy in Job, becomes, by the Middle Ages, the literal throne of the devil. Christian imagination tightened the association between the ancient sea monster and Satan, especially as the book of Revelation moved to the center of apocalyptic preaching. Other bestiaries describe related sea monsters in more practical terms. The Physiologus, a Greek text compiled between the 2nd and 4th centuries CE and endlessly reused throughout medieval Europe, tells of an enormous whale with 2 natures. When hungry, it opens its mouth and releases a sweet scent, luring small fish inside, before swallowing them whole. When at rest, it floats motionless at the surface, so vast that sailors mistake it for an island. They land, tie their ships to it, and light fires to cook, until the heat awakens the creature and it dives, dragging ships and men into the abyss. This monster appears under many names: whale, cetacean, island beast. In Latin bestiaries of the 12th and 13th centuries, it is called Aspidocaloni or Aspido testudo, a creature so immense it is compared to the beast that swallowed Jonah. The description is blunt. Sailors land upon it, the creature moves, and all are drowned. If that sounded familiar, it's because we've already met similar descriptions in the Kraken episode. In Norse sources, the same fear takes form in creatures like Lyngbakr and Hafgufa, island beasts so vast that sailors mistake their backs for land. Medieval theologians reading Job and the Psalms increasingly collapse this creature into a single identity. The island whale is no longer merely whale-like. It is identified outright with Leviathan, the biblical sea monster. By the 13th century, Leviathan appears not only in bestiaries, but in medieval encyclopedias that aim to catalog the world. In these texts, Leviathan is given its own entry as an unconquerable monster that lives in the sea. It is almost always paired with Behemoth, the land beast created at the same time, and separated because no single place could contain them both. Leviathan is assigned a habitat, the deep ocean, a fixed nature, and a role at the end of time when God alone will kill it and its flesh will be eaten at a cosmic feast. The illustrations show a fire-breathing sea dragon swallowing ships or souls, presented less as symbol than as a creature with behavior, territory, and limits. Whether called Leviathan outright or folded into these island whales and devilfish ridden by Satan as a vehicle, medieval writers treated such beings as real maritime dangers. The sea was not empty. It was inhabited by monsters large enough to be mistaken for land. The Hebrew Bible never gives a full origin story for Leviathan. It hints at ancient waters and creation, but it does not say when Leviathan was made or why. Those details appear in texts from the Second Temple period. These works were widely read in antiquity and expand the brief biblical hints into full creation narratives. In one strand of the Hebrew tradition, the creation story slows down and adds an extra scene. After land and sea are pulled apart, God brings forth two great creatures, one called Behemoth and the other Leviathan. They are too vast to share the same domain, so they must be separated. Behemoth is sent to the land, to a wild, desolate region described as having 1,000 mountains. Leviathan is sent into the waters, into the farthest, deepest part of the sea. There, Leviathan waits, held back for a future time when it will finally be devoured. In Enoch, Leviathan is described as a female monster dwelling in the abyss of the sea, paired with a male behemoth on land. This version differs from the Leviathan of Job, but preserves the idea of the two beasts as a divided pair, one bound to the sea and the other to the land. In one later Jewish apocalypse, the story of Behemoth and Leviathan reaches its climax at the end of days. When history has run its course and the anointed figure finally appears, Behemoth emerges from its hidden place on land, and Leviathan rises from the depths of the sea. These are the same two monsters said to have been created in the early days of the world and kept apart ever since, preserved for this final moment. In this vision, they are no longer a threat. Instead, they are slaughtered and served as food for the survivors of the last days. The creatures that once symbolized chaos and danger are turned into a feast that sustains the righteous. This idea, Behemoth and Leviathan held back from the beginning so they can become end-time nourishment, becomes one of the most persistent themes in later Jewish legends about Leviathan. By the time Leviathan had become a cosmic dragon in scripture and a salted monster in rabbinic imagination, sailors had already given it a new home, the edge of the map. As I mentioned in some of my earlier videos, medieval and early modern charts did not show empty oceans. They showed ideas. Monsters curled at the margins, not just as decorations, but as warnings. A sea dragon drawn beside a coastline meant unknown depth, unknown weather, unknown currents. Here be dragons was less a literal claim than a way of saying, the world stops here and something else begins. If you've seen old charts like the Carta Marina, you've already met that world. Seas thick with whales, serpents, and impossible fish, each label half geography and half myth. Those maps are where Leviathan stops being just a line in a psalm and becomes a shape you can point at with your finger. Leviathan, as a name, drifted into this cartographic folklore. Any immense, dangerous creature of the deep could be folded into it. A whale that surfaced like an island, a serpent that coiled around a ship, a shadow that rose beneath the keel and turned day to dusk. All of these could be Leviathan if the storyteller wanted them to be. In northern waters, Norse sagas told of Lyngbakr, the heatherback, a creature so vast that moss and small plants grew on its back. Sailors would see what looked like a low green island and steer toward it, only to feel the ground shift under their feet. They would scramble back to their longship as the island moved, flipped, and slid into the depths. Elsewhere, Christian bestiaries told the same story about Aspidokiloni, the island whale. Different names, same fear. At sea, the difference between rock and flesh is only revealed when it is too late. When a rabbinic tale says that scholars landed on an island, lit a fire, and fled when it began to roll, calling it the back of Leviathan, it is tapping into this shared sailor's nightmare. The monster is not a symbol on the horizon. It is the thing you might be standing on right now. Even outside religious texts, sailors' reports echoed the Leviathan pattern. Whales spurting water 3 times higher than the mast could be retold as a dragon breathing out fountains. A pod of animals moving together under the surface could bulge the sea into what looked like a single colossal back. In a storm, when waves rose and fell higher than the ship itself, it was easy to imagine some vast body coiling just out of sight. In modern sightings, long-backed creatures in misty lakes and open water, seen at a distance for a second in bad light, get slotted into a similar mental shape. A ridge of humps, a long neck, something too big to belong there. The names change: sea serpent, lake monster, cryptid, but the outline stays familiar. Leviathan gives a language for that outline. It is the name for the feeling that there is something under the keel, older than the boat, that rises when it wants to and cannot be commanded. You don't have to believe that a single fire-breathing dragon is circling the globe. All you need is the experience of looking down into deep water and knowing you would not see it coming if something vast began to move. On a map, this becomes a dragon drawn at the edge of the ink. In a myth, it becomes a world serpent coiled around creation. In a sailor story, it becomes the thing that almost swallowed us and might be waiting still. And in all of these, the sea is not empty. It is inhabited. If the biblical texts gave Leviathan grandeur and the Apocrypha gave it an apocalyptic role, later traditions gave it something else entirely: proximity. Leviathan was no longer only a distant cosmic abstraction. It became something you could encounter, mistake for land, and almost die upon. It appeared in stories about travel, food, and shelter. By this point in the tradition, we've also already encountered another key idea. Leviathan was not originally imagined as a single world dragon, but as a pair, male and female. To keep creation intact, God slaughtered and salted the female, setting her aside for the feast at the end of days, while the male was left alive to circle the depths alone. All of this leads to the central image found in religious texts. In the future, God will make a feast for the righteous from the flesh of Leviathan. The salted female Leviathan, preserved since creation, is brought out. The righteous eat. Some traditions add that whatever flesh remains will be sold in the markets of Jerusalem, as if the cosmic sea dragon were simply another commodity at the end of time. According to later Midrashic tradition, 3 mythical beasts mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, the bird Ziz, the animal Behemoth, and the sea creature Leviathan, will be served at the feast. The Hebrew imagination does not stop with the feast. From Leviathan's skin, God fashions dwellings for the righteous. Some receive a full sukkah, a booth made entirely from the hide of the sea monster. Others receive smaller coverings or ornaments, each according to merit. Whatever skin remains is stretched over the walls of the New Jerusalem, shining from one end of the world to the other. In this legend, Leviathan's final form is not a corpse at the bottom of the sea. It is food and shelter. The chaos monster is not merely destroyed. It is consumed, worn, and built into paradise. It's important to be clear about this point. The Feast of Leviathan belongs to the Hebrew imagination and its later traditions. In the Christian Bible, Leviathan never becomes food, shelter, or reward. The New Testament does not preserve the banquet. Instead, it keeps the dragon as an enemy to be destroyed, echoed in the beast from the sea in Revelation. Where Jewish tradition imagines chaos being eaten and transformed, Christian scripture pushes toward final defeat and eradication. The monster is slain, but not shared. So far, Leviathan has been largely traced through a Near Eastern lineage, with a detour through its Canaanite ancestor, Lotan. But as a sea serpent, Leviathan belongs to a much wider family of World Serpent myths. It's worth zooming out briefly, not to lose focus, but to see how Leviathan sits within that broader pattern. In the Babylonian Enuma Elish, the universe begins with mingled waters. From this primordial sea emerges Tiamat, a goddess of salt water and chaos. As younger gods multiply and rebel, Tiamat creates a horde of monsters to destroy them. Marduk, a storm god, steps forward as champion. Armed with winds and a mighty bow, Marduk confronts Tiamat. He traps her with the winds, inflating her body like a sail, and then fires an arrow that pierces her heart. After killing her, he slices her in two. From one half, he fashions the sky, from the other, the earth. Tiamat becomes the world. In that sense, Tiamat is both Leviathan's cousin and opposite. She is a serpent-like chaos sea, defeated by a storm god. But instead of being eaten at the end, she is eaten by time itself, recycled into the building material of reality. In Norse myth, Jörmungandr is the Midgard serpent, child of the trickster god Loki. Odin throws him into the ocean that encircles the world, and the serpent grows so large that he eventually bites his own tail. He literally becomes a living Ouroboros, the serpent in a circle around the earth. Jörmungandr's archenemy is the thunder god Thor. Their encounters are legendary. In one, Thor tries to fish him up from the sea. In another, at the final battle of Ragnarok, they face each other in a fight neither will survive. Thor kills Jörmungandr with his hammer, but walks only 9 steps before collapsing, dead from the serpent's venom. The world shatters. Fire consumes the earth. Afterward, a new world rises from the sea. Jörmungandr is a world serpent whose death marks the end and rebirth of the cosmos, but unlike Leviathan, no one is planning to eat him. In Egyptian thought, Apophis is the serpent of chaos and darkness. Every night, Ra sails through the underworld beneath the earth. And every night, Apophis tries to swallow the solar bark. Priests recited spells to aid Ra in this struggle. In temple art, we see Apophis as a massive serpent, sometimes hacked apart, sometimes bound by chains. Yet he never stays dead. Each night he returns. His existence explains why the sun's journey is perilous, why eclipses and storms happen, the serpent's brief victories. Unlike Leviathan, Apophis is never domesticated into God's pet. He never becomes a feast. He is an eternal antagonist. Set against other world serpents, Leviathan stands apart. Like Tiamat, it is bound to primordial waters. Like Jörmungandr, it can be imagined encircling the world. And like Apophis, it is a dragon of chaos that resists order rather than serving it. But only Leviathan ends this way. Tiamat is torn apart and becomes the structure of the world. Jörmungandr dies at the end of time and poisons the earth as he falls. And Apophis is fought again and again, night after night, and never finished. Leviathan uniquely is killed, carved, cooked, and shared. Chaos is not merely subdued, it is eaten, and even its skin becomes shelter for the righteous. We've already seen hints of Leviathan's fate, but some later mythic and apocalyptic traditions go further, dramatizing Leviathan's last moments. Behemoth versus Leviathan, the eschatological duel. Some religious texts imagine a final duel between the two great beasts at the end of days. It is described as a vast cosmic spectacle witnessed by the righteous. Behemoth, the colossal beast of the land, charges forward with its horns, while Leviathan, armored in scales and fins, coils and turns in the depths of the sea. One poet says their bodies fill the space between land and water so completely that no breeze can pass between them as they strike and entwine. In some tellings, Leviathan kills Behemoth with a blow of its fins, even as Behemoth delivers a fatal strike with its tail. In others, Behemoth catches Leviathan by the horn and splits it, while Leviathan's counterblow proves just as deadly. Both beasts fall, and the struggle ends. Finally, in the Christian New Testament, specifically the Book of Revelation, the imagery of sea dragons resurfaces in another form. John, the visionary, describes seeing a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and, note this, 7 heads. It resembles a leopard, has feet like a bear, and a mouth like a lion. The dragon, identified as Satan, gives this beast its power and throne. The text does not call this creature Leviathan. But the combination of a sea origin, multiple heads, and opposition to God echoes the same deep mythic pattern we've been tracing. In Revelation, this beast becomes a symbol of oppressive empire and spiritual deception. It is destroyed at Christ's return. The dragon itself is eventually cast into the lake of fire. So even here, at the far edge of the biblical tradition, the image of a monstrous sea beast resurfaces, mutating into a figure of political and spiritual evil. Leviathan's DNA, multi-headed dragon of the deep, has made it all the way to the last book of the Christian canon. Now that we have traced Leviathan from its origins on the Mediterranean shore millennia ago, across the Bible and medieval bestiaries, we are back where we started with a final question. If there is a dragon waiting beneath the ocean waves, who can truly control it? In the beginning, we said that God fought Leviathan but did not kill it. Some say he was chained in the abyss beneath the coldest layer of the sea to await the end of days. Others say his body will become a feast and his skin a shelter. And in John's prophecy, it is said that at the end of the world, Leviathan will rise again, returning with the fury of creation unbound. Thank you for watching. More mythos stories are coming.